recording. We're live.
All right. So okay then. So we are in Revelation 17, and where we left off last time was at verse 6. So we're gonna pick it up with verses 7 and 8. And Revelation 17, very challenging and complicated chapter. Probably maybe the toughest, most complicated one of all of the chapters in the Bible, because there's so much going on. And last week we went through Mystery Babylon, and we talked about how, just kind of to review, how it started out with the Garden of Eden and the fall of Adam, and then it went on where, Noah and his sons got in the ark because of the incursion of the Nephilim from the fallen angels. And then one of Noah's sons, Shem, gives birth to a line that leads to the nation Israel, and of course Jesus Christ. And then his other son, Ham, gives birth to a son named Cush, who gives birth to Nimrod. He became the first world emperor, the guy who, in the plain of Shinar, established the great city-states, Babylonia, Akkad, Erech, and so on and so forth. And then he later became deified as like this God-man figure. And he united the world together in a one-religion form of government, where he was the supreme ruler until God confounded the languages, and in doing so forced the people to separate out into different speaking groups or people groups based upon their ability to speak. And as a result, Nimrod's religion, which was the Babylonian one world religion where blood sacrifice, child sacrifice, sexual debauchery, and the occult, that religion spread around the world with the different people groups that were scattered out of Babylon when the Tower of Babel was interrupted by God. And so when it did that, it became what ultimately became known as a mystery religion. So Mystery Babylon is this sort of religious system that Nimrod really instituted on a formalized basis in ancient Babylon, that is really, really received its genesis, no pun intended, in the Garden of Eden, when Satan goes to Eve and says, if you obtain occultic knowledge, you can become a goddess. And that's kind of the basis for the Nimrod religion. You can obtain occultic knowledge, you can become a god man. And so, once the nation scattered, the Babylonian paganism scattered with it, and as a result, ultimately, you had different nations accepting the basis of what we're going to refer to as Mystery Babylon, which is the mythos that starts in Babylon, which is contrasted against the gospel of Jesus Christ. And the three primary propositions were a dying and resurrected sun god king. And we know that Nimrod died because he was chopped up probably by Shem for his abominations. And so his wife Semiramis promoted the idea that he'd come back to life, and he died so he could become the sun. And then he impregnated her with a beam of sunlight, and she gave birth to a reincarnated form of his body, and he grew up to be the king. So we have the dying and then resurrected sun god king. And we're going to see that this mythos that started way back in ancient Babylon actually shows up again in Revelation chapter 17, where the present day, during the tribulation, that is, manifestation of ancient Nimrod, the dying and then resurrected sun god king, plays itself out again before the eyes of the whole world. And then you have the second portion of that would be your virgin queen of heaven, earth mother goddess, who Semiramis embodied during the time in ancient Babylon when she was married to Nimrod. But that particular persona is embodied in Revelation 17 again. When John sees his vision, he says he sees a woman riding the beast. And so Nimrod's wife, Semiramis, lives again in sort of a symbolic or metaphorical sense, in that John sees her in his vision that he writes about in 96 AD of the end of days during the tribulation period. And then the third facet of the Mystery Babylon religious system is the virgin-born sun god prince, who's the son of the sun god. And he is the resurrected king who himself is in a different body, but embodies the spirit of his dying and sacrificial father. The father, dies. The dying and resurrected sun god king is resurrected in the form of the virgin-born sun god prince. And so we see that sort of a mimicking of the gospel, Jesus Christ, where God is manifest in human flesh, and then he has to die for the sins of the world, and then he comes back again the third day, and all of that. But we saw Satan counterfeiting that long before it even happened. So that's the basis of the Mystery Babylon religious system. It has taken a mystery form that is disguised in modern day Druidism, which relates back to the Middle Ages and before, modern day Wicca, witchcraft, Satanism, the New World Order or New Age movement, Eastern mysticism that we see that is the underpinning of Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, and the like. All of those things, as well as Freemasonry, apostate Christianity, pseudo-Christianity, Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, Masons, all have as their operative nucleus the ancient Babylonian religious system that moved throughout all of the different ages and epochs of time, all the way up, we find out, to the time of the return of Christ to the earth. So, Mystery Babylon, the ancient religious system, is alive and well in the 70th week of Daniel during the tribulation period. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what Revelation 17 says in the description of these last days. And again, it can be very complicated. There are a number of great Bible scholars that have given different, various, and sundry interpretations. And so we're going to talk about all those. And then obviously we have to read the text. And then you got to let the Holy Spirit lead you to believe which one of these is the correct interpretation. And so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Verse 7 and 8. Ingrid.
17, 7 and 8. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is.
Okay, now that's a mouthful. So, gosh, let's see. You're right. Where do you begin? Let's take a look. Verse 7. And the angel said to me, Why did you marvel? And it goes on to say in verse 8, the beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. They that dwell upon the earth shall wonder, whose names aren't written in the book of life. This means the unsaved people during the tribulation. They're going to wonder after the beast when they behold the beast that was, is not, and yet is. So now that's an interesting, set of changes. And the interpretation I think that's applicable there is that it's making reference to, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. We've got existed in the past. At the time that John was writing about this, was not in existence, and ascends out of the abyss and goes into destruction. Was, is not, is. existed, fell, revived. The interpretation that Dave Hunt and others have given to it, and I think the one that's appropriate, is it's the revived Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the kingdom of the Antichrist. Existed, didn't exist, and then existed again. And whether or not you believe it's actually the Roman Empire itself, behind this Roman Empire, the revived Roman Empire, is none other than Satan himself. And, he's the one that gives the strength to this one world system. So, Mystery Babylon, in the outline I did on the Antichrist, I kind of gave a summary where I said, in fact, I'll take a look at it and I'll just refer to it. It's the Antichrist outline that I gave you guys. I have copies of it today if anybody's missing one. On page 7, I gave a little summary and I said, Mystery Babylon is both a woman, Satan dressed in drag, originally as Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod, and later Isis, Europa, Gaia, Mother Nature, and all of these different female goddess figures. And it's best known as the Virgin Mary, which is the goddess figure of the Roman Catholic Church, which is really the pseudo-Christian cult that has the most influence in all the world in terms of apostatizing Christianity. But in addition to Mystery Babylon being a woman rides the beast in this vision, we learned about that last week, it's also a city. Now, Dave Hunt, in his book, A Woman Rides the Beast, is adamant that based on all the factors given in Revelation 17, this city is Rome, the Vatican specifically, in Rome, Italy, because it was a city built on 7 hills, and in Revelation 17 talks about 7 mountains. Now, if you ask Joe Chambers, who's the head of Paul Creek Ministries, he says that this is absolutely referring to the rebuilt city of Babylon in Iraq. And Babylon has been rebuilt over the course of the past several years. It's not the glorious, awesome thing that it might become, but as we know, in the Middle East, there are a number of cities, the Internet City in Abu Dhabi or whatever is built in 2 years, and it looks like Disney World. It's incredible what they could do. So by the time the tribulation period begins, the city of Iraq might be, the city of Babylon in Iraq might be much more impressive than what we see now. And so prophecy scholars, Joe Chambers and Mark Hitchcock, believe that the city that is being referred to in Revelation 17 is the actual city of Babylon that's rebuilt. Now, Chuck Missler takes the position that it can be more than one interpretation. He says both Dave Hunt and Joe Chambers are right, that it's both the city of Rome to the extent that the city of Rome is the headquarters of the religious Mystery Babylon religious system embodied in the Catholic Church, as Dave Hunt has correctly pointed out. It's very coincidental that in Revelation 17 it says that this woman is wearing scarlet and purple, which is the color of the Roman Catholic Church. Almost too coincidental.
Right.
And that, it's a city built on 7 mountains, and Rome is built on 7 hills. So, I don't know, that seems to me to be an incredible coincidence. So it could be that just like many other prophetic verses in the Bible, there's a double entendre. Like 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says the apostasia, which can mean a physical departure and also mean a spiritual departure. So it means that the church would fall away from true biblical teachings, and also means the true church would disappear from the earth and be, snatched away from the planet Earth. And so I think the same is true here. That's the position I take, that it's both the city of Rome, as Dave Hunt says in A Woman Rides the Beast, but also I believe it's the economic center will be, and governmental center will ultimately become the city of Babylon and Iraq, as Joe Chambers and Mark Hitchcock says. And then in summary, I just point out, yet Mystery Babylon is even more than that. Mystery Babylon is a goddess-based false religious system that we just kind of summarized and we talked about pretty much all night last week. And from this, we get Eastern mysticism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism. Then we get Islam, and we get the Western counterpart to these false religious systems known as Freemasonry or the Masonic Lodge that kind of accepts all religious beliefs, but really is ultimately about, this higher, creator God that's above all and is countenanced in many different religious systems. And then you've got the pagan Earth Mother worship systems, such as Wicca, Druidism, and those types of things, as well as the apostate Christianity corollaries, which we would have the Roman Catholic Church, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists. I hate to say they all came sort of from the same seed, and all these are controlled by the powers that be that are really under the control of Satan himself. So Mystery Babylon is more than just one thing. Mystery Babylon is both a woman and a city and a religious system that manifests itself in a governmental system, which ultimately, during the tribulation period, will give us a one-world religion and a one-world government ruled over by the Antichrist with 10 different sort of regional governors. We find out that the United Nations and the World Bank has already divided the world into 10 economic regions already.
Do you think you can repeat that? Because that was a great synopsis. He said the mystery of Babylon is a woman, a city, and a religion. And it wasn't nice how he said that, yeah. Woman, a city, and a government.
Government, city, children. Government, city, and a woman.
Yeah,
Yes.
In my Antichrist, it's funny because I was just going back through it just to sort of, geez, this Mystery Babylon thing is so, I've read every book possible and nobody has a real good handle on explaining what it is. Even these great published Bible prophecy guys are all over the place. They can't even sum. But when I read the little summary, I was, oh man, I wrote that. I think the Holy Spirit gives grace because it made sense. Yeah. And I said, Mystery Babylon is both a woman, Satan dressed in drag, as Semiramis originally, and then later as Isis or Europa, Gaia, Mother Nature, the Virgin Mary, so on and so forth. These goddess figures that keep appearing in every culture throughout world history. But it's also a city. Which city is that? Rome and Italy, and also another physical city. Babylon and Iraq. Rome being the religious center for the physical city, and Babylon and Iraq being the cultural and economic center for this one world government. And eventually, the need for the city of Rome will be done away with, and some people believe that Antichrist will move his religious headquarters from the Vatican in Rome to the new rebuilt city, to the plain of Shinar. And there's a verse that supports that, and we're going to look at that, and that comes from out of Zechariah, where Zechariah says, what do you see? What do you see? Well, I see a vision of, and this is the only place in the Bible where there are female angels. 2 female angels are grabbing a wicker basket, and they're carrying something in a wicker basket. And they say, what's inside? And there's a woman, and she's an unclean woman. And, these angels that are females have the wings of a stork, which is an unclean ceremonial animal in ancient Judaism. And it says, what are they doing? Well, they're carrying the basket away. They fly off into the air. And said, where are they taking her? To the plain of Shinar, to build her a temple on the plain of Shinar. The plain of Shinar is where the city of Babylon was built by Nimrod. And so, what you see is, Dave Hunt made a very good point in his Woman Rides the Beast book. He said, Mystery Babylon is giving us the roots of what we would call today feminism, women's rights movement, feminism. Women are equal to men, and women need to be in charge. And you turn on the TV shows, and now the superheroes are women, and they're beating up the bad guys, and the guys are saying, "Oh, help me!" And all of that is really Satan's attempt to rival what God has done, or to refute what God has done. And so what we find is feminism is maybe being prophesied about by the prophet Zechariah in that passage about 2 female angels who have unclean wings of a stork flying this woman in a basket out to the plain of Shinar to build her a temple of her own. So it could be that Dave Hunt is correct about Rome being that city, but then in the very final phases of the tribulation period, or at least the first half of the tribulation period, it relocates itself to Babylon and Iraq. And there it becomes the seat of the governmental authority of the Antichrist. So it's a city, Rome, and also Babylon and Iraq, but it's also a goddess-based false religious system, and we get from that Eastern mysticism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Freemasonry, Masonic Lodge, and apostate pseudo-Christianity, TBN, the prosperity ministries, the Protestant ministries that don't believe that Jesus is God, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, behind all of this will be Satan, and he'll use this Mystery Babylon system to unite the world together, first using religion. All the people can be as one, we stand and like to teach the world, the song, and you use religion to unite the world together. And then you can have your 10 region World Bank, IMF regions become basically political protectorates, and then that becomes your one world government, which is divided out into 10 regions. So we see the 10 horns, the 7 heads and 10 horns, could be 10 regions with 10 regional governors who ultimately will give all of their authority to one man. Instead of it having 10 governors ruling the 10 regions of the world, they're going to all swear allegiance to one man. And this one man would be the Antichrist.
Is there any structure right now that mimics that or close to it with the...
Fictionally, but I'll tell you, if you've ever watched Star Wars movies, this is exactly what happens when the Federation cedes all their power to the Emperor. Similar sort of thing. I mean, I don't know of a real, real life.
A real life corollary, I would say the World Bank
has
divided. They give aid to different nations, and they've got 10 regional areas. And so the IMF, the World Bank, and so the United Nations will give credence to those areas. Oh, Region 6 of, the World Bank's, financial restructuring plan. And so we already have the regions divided out, the region where you have United States of America and Canada and Mexico all kind of combined together into a super continent.
Yeah.
And they talk about when they're going to do this new currency, and the currency for us will be the Amero, and it'll be a Mexican, American, Canadian currency. And then in Europe, there'll be the euro. And then in Asia, they'll have an Asian currency called the, and it'll be controlled by IMF, World Bank. But ultimately, it's international globalism. And we see as a result of the attack last Friday in Paris, hours after our last Bible study, the first thing they started saying on CNN, oh my goodness, here we go, the usual suspects, Anderson Cooper and all the, what we need is to unite together, and then they start interviewing, like, whenever that it's artificial tomfoolery, and when you start going directly from Anderson Cooper reporting for CNN on location in Paris to Hollywood to have the celebrities, and then you got the celebrity, Beyonce or Jennifer Aniston standing up, Jennifer, what do you have to say about the Paris bombings? Like, I dropped out of high school, but let me give you my opinion on international geopolitics. Well, I think this is clear that this all has to stop. Well, how will it stop? We all have to unite together. We need to do things differently. There has to be a change. And I'm listening to these Hollywood high school dropout actors and actresses lecturing me about how, as a result of the terrorist bombings in Paris, the world needs to restructure as one united global brotherhood and sisterhood of people. And that's exactly the whole plan behind it. My position has always been that these guys who do these terrorist attacks, they're not really operatives of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever the particular terrorist flavor of the month is. These guys are the useful idiots, the sock puppets of the powers that be, that use these mind-controlled, terroristic individuals to go out and do terrible things for the Hegelian dialectical purpose of getting the masses to move to the position that they want them to. Let's blow something up, and then we can take more rights away from the people that aren't blowing stuff up.
Hegelio-Galactic?
Hegelian dialectic. Oh,
Sorry,
that's based upon, there's a German philosopher named George Hegel from the 1800s, maybe thereabouts, maybe late 1700s, early 1800s. George Hegel, and his political philosophy was called the dialectic, where if you want to get a person to your position and you don't have the absolute muscle to force them to your position, what you do is overstate your position by getting the communists to invade Southeast Asia and demand a communist state. And we know that you've got on one side you've got capitalism, on the other side of the spectrum, far right capitalism, far left is communism. But in the middle is a compromise position called socialism. Not quite as crazy as communism, and not quite as free and benevolent as capitalism. So if you want the whole world to be a socialist state, you need theses versus antithesis to get you to the middle position, which is synthesis. So you got theses, capitalism, antithesis, communism.
Okay.
And then you got the Cold War in the 60s and 70s, where the United States of America on the right versus the Soviet Union on the left. And then you eventually push those two sides against one another until they realize, all right, no more fighting, let's just compromise. And then you have the synthesis, which is
Socialism.
worldwide socialism. And so if you want the world to be a one-world socialist state, then you demand communism. So you get some crazy communist warlords to demand, like in China, you got Mao Zedong and his severe form of communism in China, and then you've got other guys like Che Guevara, in South America doing sort of the same thing. And then you eventually reach a compromise position where it's a socialist state. And that's kind of what we have here in the United States. We've had that in France for the longest time, and in Europe as well. And eventually, where you're dependent upon the government for everything, and the government can control everything you do, you eventually will be able to get the one world global government. But if you have independent national sovereign states, it's very, very difficult to get that. So I would say what George Hegel so cleverly pointed out is that if you want to get somebody to position B, you got to have a position A and a position C fight against people, and then eventually 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, hey, I know, we, the Soviet Union, will arm Fidel Castro with nuclear warheads in Cuba, and then when Kennedy demands that the missiles be taken out, we'll insist that we be able to leave military advisors. Okay, you can have the military advisors, just no nukes. And so what we really wanted all along was, Soviet advisors in Cuba, and bases in Cuba. So we put nuclear warheads in there, which we knew you wouldn't allow us to keep. And then when we decided to give them up, you compromised by letting us stay as long as the missiles go. And that's Hegelian dialectical process of takeover, slowly but sure. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're gaining ground. Not as fast as somebody might want, but you're gaining ground, which you don't lose. And so that's how you're going to eventually be able to move us into a one-world government. So you take a look at the beast that you saw was and is not, ascends out of the bottomless pit and goes into perdition. Clearly, we're talking about the kingdom of the Antichrist, and there's a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns, and we kind of talked about that.
Do we have a timeline for this? What period is it the Great Tribulation? Is it the tribulation period?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to demarcate all the events, but the general consensus I find amongst Bible prophecy scholars is that this establishment of the one world government with a one world religion really takes place during the first half of the tribulation.
Okay.
Because now you're going to have world peace, and if you unite
That's
together,
right. Yep, yep.
and you're going to use this mystery Babylon system, the religious woman who's riding the beast that we read about in Revelation 17, 1, 2, and 3, she's riding the beast, but only during the first half of the tribulation. Because at the midway point of the tribulation, the Antichrist gets killed. And then he's resurrected. What does that remind you of? The dying and resurrected sun god king actually comes to pass, literally, in Revelation 17, when Antichrist is killed, goes down into the bottomless pit, and is indwelled, we find out from Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, is indwelt by Satan himself, and then he's resurrected. And when he's resurrected, the whole world says, how are you,
Yes, I remember reading this. Yes.
right?
Yes.
How are you going to oppose an enemy that can't be killed?
Yes.
You know, and the whole world wonders after the
Yeah.
beast. Now, the world is willing to accord more than political kudos. Hey, John F. Kennedy is the most charismatic and awesome, young, dynamic political leader in the history of the United States of America. Antichrist would be sort of like that. But when he dies and moves back to life, he's going to take it to another level. I'm not just, Time Magazine Man of the Year, People Magazine Sexiest Man Alive. I am God in human flesh. And once he comes back from the dead, 3 of those 10 regional governors or kings will say, no, you're taking it too far, my friend. We're not doing that. And he gets rid of those guys. He uses his power and destroys 3 of the 10 regional heads. And the others cede their power to him. And now he's got, and we find that in Daniel. Look in Daniel, it says, there were 10 horns, and, another horn came up, and a little one, and he broke off 3 of the horns. And so what we find out is Antichrist puts down the rebellion amongst the 10 regional governors, and the rest cede their power to him. And now he doesn't need what? What is it that he doesn't need?
the heart anymore.
Doesn't need to pretend. The fake pseudo-Christian, false apostate Christianity headed by the Roman Catholic Church, one world, kumbaya, Hindu, Chrislam, Catholicism, false religious-based system, the Mystery Babylon system, which Dave Hunt, I think, effectively argues is headquartered in Rome, doesn't need that anymore. So she's destroyed. And Antichrist is the one that destroys her. And God puts it in Antichrist's heart to get rid of this false religious system, to judge her for all the things she's done. And so, whether the city of Rome will be the city that's destroyed, or it's the city of Iraq, and then there's a whole another school of thought that says, well, that city is none other than New York City. When you think of the World Trade Center bombing and the like, and what that looked like when the Twin Towers were smoking, and people were standing off in New York Harbor or on the other side of the Hudson in Jersey City or Hoboken looking at the burning of the World Trade Center, it's very, reminiscent of what you see in Revelation 18 and the description of the city, a woman on many waters. So Babylon and Iraq doesn't sit on many waters, and Rome doesn't sit on many waters, but New York City, you could say New York Harbor, Hudson River, East River. So it could be the spirit of this Mystery Babylon is, comprises the economic and political heft of New York City. But I think the safer bet, if I have to bet on one, I'm going to go with Babylon, Iraq, and the city of Rome, with New York City being usually a close third in everybody else's minds. Ingrid, you were gonna throw something in there? No comment there? Okay, so
And the land of shine?
Land of Shinar, it's a plain, and in that large flat plain, in what used to be Sumer, you had the city of Babylon rise up, and then Akkad, and then Calneh, Erech. All of those mighty Sumerian cities were located in the plain of Shinar. So when you hear the word Shinar in the Bible, it's synonymous with Babylon.
I want to say there's no water in the north part of this of Iraq and Syria. So there's not the Gulf of.
I don't think you can say the city of Babylon. I'd have to take a look at it. I probably should. I don't know if you guys have it in the back of any of your Bibles, the map that gives us ancient
I
Babylon.
think, I'm not sure. I'm thinking.
I'm
taking out
Turn
loud.
the light just a little bit.
Yeah. It's
See
right
the
in your
spots,
face.
man. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, just to get it right. It might even help there too.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't.
Just a little more. Just a little more.
Assyrian and Babylon
I
Empire?
don't think you can say that Iraq or Babylon in Iraq sits on many waters.
Well, if you look this map, you have various Gulf, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea,
Okay.
the Persian Gulf.
Let's take a look and see. Where do you have Babylon on there?
So this is Assyrian and Babylonian empires.
Okay. Let me take a look here, and let's see if we can find where ancient Babylon would have been more over here. I don't see it. Media. Yeah, Babylonia. Yeah. So, but people sitting at home,
You have it in Mesopotamia.
Babylonia would have been kind of right about here, and it's pretty much landlocked. Kind of take a look where my finger is.
Yes, probably.
So that's why I have some problem finding. There you go, Armenia, home of the Kardashians. Yeah, so this is the area
Because the
right
this is
there,
Syria.
Babylonia.
Syria, this is
And
Iraq,
so Babylon is on
the Persian Gulf.
the Euphrates River, but you're not going to have it on many waters. So no, the city of ancient Babylon didn't sit on many waters, so
Okay.
that's why we say that verse doesn't apply.
Okay.
So anyway, now Ingrid, go ahead and give us 9 and 10.
And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
Okay, so in 8 we saw what the beast that thou sawest was and is not shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. Appropriate interpretation of verse 8, Antichrist who lives and then isn't alive and then comes back to life again, right? Verse 8, the beast that thou sawest existed at one point and then was not and comes out of the bottomless pit. I think that's making reference to the Antichrist himself being alive and then being assassinated and then coming back out of the bottomless pit. And then we go on to 9 and 10 where Ingrid read that here's the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads upon which the woman is sitting are 7 mountains. And that's where Dave Hunt gets the idea that since Rome is a city built on 7 hills and the colors happen to be that she's wearing, scarlet and purple, he's saying, this is Rome. It says, the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. That's very, very confusing, right? And it's very involved. But there's several interpretations of that, and we're going to talk about what those interpretations are. And let's do this. Let's go ahead and have you read straight on through, if you would, Ingrid, and read for us 9 and 10 again.
And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is. And the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition.
I was listening to that in my car, my little, MP3 Bible thing. I listened to that verse something like 30 times. I hit the rewind button. I'm like,
What on
What?
earth?
world, when I get to heaven, first thing to do is thank Jesus for dying on the cross and pulling me out of hell, though I deserve to be there. But I'm going to get time to pull the Holy Spirit aside and say, like, what were you doing?
What exactly? Please.
Could
help
you
me.
not have rewritten this in a way that was more understandable? Because it's the beast that was and is not, even he is of the 8th. Oh, excuse me, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. And that is as confusing as anything. But I think we'll take a look at it and we'll give it a shot and try to kind of explain it. And there are a number of different interpretations, and I broke it out into basically 4 or 5 major Bible prophecy schools of thought with regards to the 8 kings and the kingdoms of Revelation 17:9 through 11. The Mark Hitchcock, John Walvoord description of that particular set of verses, Revelation 17:9 through 11, is that those 8 kings are kingdoms. Those kingdoms are the Egyptian kingdom, Assyria, Neo-Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, the first Roman Empire, and then the revived Roman Empire. And then, from the revived Roman Empire, is the final one world government of the Gentiles, which will be headed by the Antichrist. So Egypt, headed by the Pharaoh. So 8 kings are also kingdoms. Egypt was ruled over by the pharaohs, Assyria by the Assyrian kings, Neo-Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar, who was this really impressive head of gold. Medo-Persia, the leader there was Cyrus and Darius, were the 2 great leaders of the Medo-Persian Empire. And then Greece, of course, was led by Alexander the Great. The first Roman Empire, ruled over not by the pharaohs, but by the Caesars. And then you have revived Rome, which is the second Roman Empire, ruled over by 10 kings. And again, I suggested that the IMF and the World Bank has divided the world into 10 financial regions. And these 10 kings would appear to be 10 regional governors of the New World Order. And then finally, there's a one world government that comes from out of these, the 7th. And I think that's kind of, what that verse is trying to say there when it says, and the beast that was and is not. Who's the beast that was and is not? That's the Antichrist who gets assassinated. So he was, and then he isn't alive anymore. But then he comes out of the bottom of the pit. And it says, even he is the 8th and is of the 7 and goeth into perdition. So the Walvoord Hitchcock school seems to be suggesting that the Antichrist and his one world government is itself the 8th great kingdom combination and is of the 7, the revived Roman Empire. So that
7 mountains, like the 7, like representing the Roman hills.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I don't understand. It is the 7. What 7? The last 7 I remember referencing were the 7 heads of
7 mountains representing the Roman.
Well, right,
City
no,
Road.
but that was
No?
that's like that's the verse before. That's
Yeah.
in verse 8. And it talks about, verse 8, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, which I think means Antichrist is alive, is assassinated, goes into the bottomless pit, and comes back to life.
Got it.
And then it goes on to talk about, in verse 9, and here's the mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, and that's what Dave Hunt says. And again, the mountains can be symbolic of, a king, a kingdom, or something of significance. That's why, Hitchcock doesn't buy that the seven mountains are referring to the city of Rome. He says, well, Rome isn't built on seven mountains; it was built on seven hills. But another interpretation could be that the seven mountains are also kings upon which the woman sits. I think it's a double fold. I think it's a double entendre. I think it's the literal city of Rome built on seven hills, but I also think it's the seven governors who are the seven that remain after the Antichrist kills off three that rebel against him. She is reliant upon this 10, not nation necessarily, but 10 geopolitical region for her power. And eventually, it's that 10 region area that cedes its power to the Antichrist. We're going to find out when we look in the book of Daniel, has to kill off or subdue 3 of the 10 who rebel against him. So if you knock off 3 of 10, that gives you what? 7. And so there we go. We transition to the latter half of verse 9 in Revelation 17, or verse 10. It says, and there are 7 kings. Now, I think here it's making reference to 7 historical former world rulers. But like I said, there's oftentimes many double entendres. There's twofold interpretations of the 7. I think when you get to verse 10, the 7 kings are not talking about 7 mountains anymore.
Okay.
If you pay attention to the Bible, you'll see that the number 7 is probably the most important number in the Bible.
Yeah.
You got a lot of things based on 7s. The 70th week of Daniel, 70 sevens is what that amounts to, 490 prophetic years. You have how many days in a week? 7. 6 days work, 1 day rest for an entire week, which is the 7. You have, I'm sorry, say
The
again.
creation of the world, 6 days and 1 day rest, so the total of 7 days.
Yes, that's where we get. Yep, that's where we get the week, right? Yes, 6 days work, 1 day rest. Creation is basically the week on a cosmological scale. God works for 6 days to create the universe and then rests the 7th day. Man that lives on the earth works for 6 days, rests 1 day, and that 7-day group is called the week. It's a complete unit. And so what we find here that God points out there are 7 important kings. 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. So, what are we talking about? 7 kings, and in verse 11, the beast that was and is not is of the 8th, is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. But verse 10 says there are 7 kings, 5 fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. So, let's take a look at verse 10. The 7 kings, which 5 are fallen, at the time that John is writing this, some Bible prophecy scholars believe that this is talking about 7 overall kings, 5 that came before John, already died, and then 1 was alive when John was writing Revelation, which is either Nero or Domitian, who was the Caesar at that time, persecuting the church. And then there's another one who has not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. So verse 10 is making reference to 7 great world emperors, would be kings over the entire earth.
And as of 96 AD,
Yeah.
as of that time,
5 already had died,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay.
1 was Domitian or Nero, I
Nero.
forget which one was alive when John was writing in 96. And depending on where you think he wrote it in 95 or whether he wrote it in 96. So you can either get Domitian or Nero. And then he says the other is not yet come. Who would that be referring to?
Antichrist.
Antichrist. He's going to continue a short space, only for, really, he's going to get the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period, because he's going to spend the first 3.5 years consolidating his power through the false religious system and through the 10 nation or 10 international regions ruled over by 10 kings or governors. And he's going to take 3.5 years to get that power consolidated, and it could be one of the 3 of those 10 kings or regional governors that set up the assassination of the Antichrist. But when he comes back from out of the bottomless pit, now he's totally indwelt by Satan. Wow. Now he gets rid of the three that opposed him. He consolidates his power over all of those regions, and now he is the ruler of the whole world. So then we drop down to verse 11. The beast that was and is not. And again, what is that making reference to?
Antichrist, when he died and then
Yep.
came back in life again.
So the beast is making reference to a specific person, not necessarily a kingdom, but the beast that was and is not. I mean, the Antichrist was alive and then he died. He is the eighth, the final world ruler. And he is of the seven, meaning that he arose from out of one of these seven, probably the seventh. The seventh of these eight kingdoms was the revived Roman Empire, which is why some people believe that, the verse in Daniel chapter 9 where it says the prince of the people that shall come and destroy the temple, those are Romans. Antichrist will be out of the Roman Empire, but it doesn't necessarily mean he was out of Italy. So that's the Antichrist, and that's what the interpretation of Walford, Mark Hitchcock. Now, Grant Jeffries, he talks about the interpretation of Revelation 17, verse 10, in light of Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 and 49, which is the metallic man dream, which is parenthetically right there. So, why don't we do this? We'll have Phil just read for us again Revelation chapter 17, verse 10.
And there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
Steve, read for us Daniel chapter 2, and you get to read 28 through 49. So you got a big chunk of real estate there.
Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 through 49.
Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel chapter 2, verse 28 through 49. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter, and he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have. Sorry. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have, more than any living, but for their sakes, and that shall make known the interpretations to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out, without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom, inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, and shall break rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh into pieces, and subdueth all things. And as iron taketh breath of all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, parts of potter's clay, and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and the part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set upon a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him.
Let me stop you right there. Okay, so now that's the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had of the metallic man, which Daniel interpreted in the days of his youth as being the head of gold is Babylon, the chest of silver is Medo-Persia, the hips of brass is the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great, and then the legs of iron are the western and eastern branch of the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire divided into two, Constantinople and Rome. But then it talks about the feet that are the feet of the statue, and they're made of iron and miry clay, and they don't cling to one another. What that's talking about is the extension of the Roman Empire that's revived. The Roman Empire comes to an end, but then it comes back to life again. This is basically Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and revived Rome, which is destroyed by the stone cut out of the mountain without hands, which is the Messiah. Now, Daniel has a dream a few years later of basically the same world empires that God gave to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar saw it as this glorious, great statue of a man, glorifying man who was the head of gold. Daniel saw these same kingdoms the way God sees them, as these horrible beast-like monsters. And so, Ingrid, if you would, read for us Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 7, which is Daniel being given the same vision a few years later by God, only he interprets it differently with different symbols.
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon,
Now Nebuchadnezzar was off the throne, so Daniel's a lot older now.
Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. And four beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had an eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I behold, lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake into pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
Very good. Now, while you're in 7, give us 23, 4, and 5. Daniel 7, 23, 4, and 5. And then
Thus he said, The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it into pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and to think to change times and laws. And they shall be given unto his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him.
Okay, and that's kind of where I get the interpretation that I've come to, that Antichrist has to knock off 3 of the 10 governors of this world system.
Yeah.
Right? It says the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth. So sometimes the beast in prophetic scripture is the Antichrist himself, another time it's the false prophet, is sort of sorcerer, magician. At other times, this fourth beast in this vision that he sees is a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be diverse from all the other kingdoms, and he shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. And that's the Antichrist kingdom. And it says, verse 24, the 10 horns are 10 kings. And now we're thinking about maybe the 10 regional governors of the world during the tribulation period. And another shall arise after them. So the 10 guys are running the show. And then all of a sudden, somebody else arises, and he shall be different from the first ones, and he shall subdue 3 of those 10 kings. I think that's Antichrist, and it's just the Antichrist isn't a man like the others. He's a Nephilim. He is a hybrid. He is a part human, part demonic, part satanic, literal biological seed of the serpent, Genesis 3, verses 15 and 16. And after he subdues those 3 kings of the 10, he speaks pompous words against the Most High and declares war on the saints of the Most High. So, now we'll go back to our chart here. And Grant Jeffrey, great Bible prophecy scholar, says that Revelation 17:10, which Phil read for us again now.
And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the order is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space.
Okay, so what Grant Jeffrey is saying is that there are 7 total great world empires. He's saying 1 is Egypt, 2 is Assyria, 3 is Babylon, 4 Persia, 5 Greece, 6 Rome 1, and 7 the revived Roman Empire. And then he says the dream that Daniel had of the 4 beasts, and then there's another one, Daniel chapter 2, verses 28 through 49, what some people will refer to as Daniel's 4 plus 1, that there are 4 world empires plus 1 more to come after that are Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then the other comes from out of Rome, so it counts as not a 5th, but really 4 plus 1 out of the 4th one. So revived Rome. So Daniel's dream countenances 3 through 7 of the overall 7 great kings of the world. Now, that's a little different than, and it could be that the interpretation is true of both. After Antichrist knocks off 3 of the 10 world governors to consolidate his reign over the whole world. Wow. And the one day I didn't send the text, Rod shows up. What's up, Rod? Good to see you, man. This is right up your alley. Well, I didn't know how long. I told him I saw you last week, but I didn't know how long you were going to be in town, so I didn't even bother. I said, he's back in Tallahassee, So what we're talking about, Rod, is Daniel chapter 17, verse 10. So now that we got Rod here, Phil, read that for me one more time.
And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when it cometh, he must continue a short space.
Rod here knows Chuck Missler from his days at Calvary Costa Mesa, and he used to go to Chuck's Bible study, so we're going to talk about some of his interpretations. Right now we're talking about Grant Jeffrey, who says that what Daniel is talking about in his vision in Daniel chapter 2 are 4 kingdoms plus one other. Again, 7 great world empires, Grant Jeffrey says, are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome 1, and then the revived Roman Empire, which Daniel sees as Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then from out of Rome comes another one, which is the revived Roman Empire. And so he kind of sees these as a lion, as a bear, as a winged leopard, and as this strange multi-headed beast with horns, this diverse, monstrous beast, different from all the others, that crushes all of the other empires. So Grant Jeffrey is saying that's the Antichrist, basically, who is the last in a long line of would-be one-world government rulers, world emperors, who all attempted, and to a certain extent had some success, but could never fully unite the world until we get to the final one, which is the Antichrist kingdom that arises and is able to accomplish that. So, again, the 4 beasts, as Daniel sees it in Daniel chapter 7, 1, the lion, the head of a lion, that's the Neo-Babylonian Empire. 2, he sees in his vision a bear. That's the second head. So you got one head being a lion, Neo-Babylon, which is the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar, the new Babylonian Empire, not the ancient Babylonia of Nimrod, but Daniel is seeing the head of gold. Remember Nebuchadnezzar in his dream said, "Oh, I saw a statue of the head of gold." And Daniel said, "Oh, you, O king Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold, the most superior, great ruler ever." Daniel has a dream about it a few years later. He sees Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold, as a lion. That's one of the heads of this 4-beast kingdom. And then he sees the second as a bear. That's none other than the kingdom that came afterwards that Nebuchadnezzar saw as the chest of silver, which is what kingdom?
Media Persia.
Media Persia. So Daniel sees Media Persia as a bear. And then the 3rd major world empire, which in the metallic man dream of Nebuchadnezzar, he saw as the hips of brass. But Daniel, when he has a dream, he doesn't see it as a glorious statue of a man. He sees it as another beast. Which beast is that? He sees a leopard, and that leopard kingdom is which kingdom?
Alexander the Great.
Of Alexander the Great, the Grecian Empire, ruled by Alexander the Great, but then divided out, remember,
Seleucus.
when he dies, Seleucus, Ptolemy,
2 more.
say 2 more,
The Seleucus and Corey. I always get this from Coriander.
the girl who doesn't come to our
Yeah.
Bible study anymore.
Cassandra.
Yes,
Cassandra.
Cassandra. Yeah,
There you
right. You got it all
Right, so you got Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassandra,
Yeah.
and Seleucus being the generals that took over. When Alexander was dying, he said, "What? Who gets your kingdom, oh great Alexander?" And he's like, "It's up to you guys. Give it to the strong.
The strong.
Whoever's the strongest, let them take it." And they divided his kingdom into 4, and the 4 were his 4 generals. And it's believed that Seleucus, who was the founder of the Seleucid dynasty that controlled Judea, Syria, modern-day Lebanon, when the ruler, the great-great-grandson of Seleucus, came along, his name was Antiochus Epiphanes, who, when the temple was rebuilt after the Babylonian Empire, allowed it to be rebuilt, or really Media Persia allowed it to be rebuilt, he went into the temple and he desecrated it by doing what?
Killing a pig. The blood. Killing
Throwing a pig on the altar and ritually defiling it, which is why it had to be ritually cleansed over the course of 7 days, and there wasn't enough oil, to do the ritual cleansing. So, one of the prophets prayed, God made the light last in the oil, and there was one day of holy oil that lasted 8 days, and from that we get Hanukkah, the festival of light, or the feast of the dedication of the temple, which was celebrated every December of the year in Israel, and which is the only holiday that from December that's actually mentioned in the Bible. That Jesus celebrated the feast of the dedication. He said it was the feast of the dedication, and it was winter, and Jesus went into the temple. What was he talking about? He's talking about Hanukkah. So Jesus didn't celebrate Christmas. Sorry to say, all you guys out there, and you've been fooled.
Yeah.
He actually celebrated Hanukkah, and Hanukkah was the feast of the dedication of the cleansing of the temple with the festival of lights, where God made the candlelight oil burn for 8 days instead of just one day. So Daniel sees these 4 beasts, but the 4 beasts has a total of how many heads? Well, this beast right here, crazy beast, has 3 heads. So you got a total of 7 heads, right? 4 beasts with 7 heads, because the 4th beast has 3 heads. So you got 4 plus 3 gives you 7 heads. And again, that may account for, mathematically speaking, the 10 regional governors of the world, or the 10 kings. We just found out in Daniel chapter 7, verses 23, 4, and 5, that this 4th beast had to subdue 3 of those 10 kings to gain his power. So now you're left with 7 total heads. And it could be that those horns on the heads, so you got this beast, got, these 3 heads, and he's got, 7 heads, but he's got different horns on there, and you had a total of 10, and 3 got broken off, so you got 7 left. Those 7 heads are the guys that are left that the Antichrist uses to consolidate his one world government and gain power, which he's able to do by the midway point of the tribulation period, which is why he doesn't need the woman who rides the beast anymore. The woman who rides the beast is, what did we say it was again? We said
It was a
It-
city,
woman,
it was a woman, and a
portion.
government.
one at a time. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Government, a woman, and the city of Rome.
Okay, and it's also a religious system.
Religious
Mysterious
system.
Mystery
Babylon.
Babylon is the religious system that begins in the garden with Satan telling Eve, if you take occultic knowledge from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you can become the world's first goddess. And from that point onward, you had the mad dash of the female of the species attempting to become gods or goddesses. And so we see that going through Noah, Ham. Shem ends up going to war with Nimrod. He's married to Semiramis, who becomes the queen of heaven and becomes the archetype of the goddess woman who gives birth to the perfect virgin son. Her husband gets killed, but he comes back to life again when she gives birth. So again, Mystery Babylon is a religious system that's based upon the 3 tripod, the 3 predicates of the Mystery Babylon system is 1, a dying and resurrected sun god king. 2, a virgin, queen of heaven, earth mother goddess. And then thirdly, you have to have the virgin born sun god prince, who is the son of the sun god king who died but's resurrected when the sun god king's son is born of a virgin, which is a perversion of the gospel that's laid out in Genesis chapter 3, the Proto-Evangelion, the first promise of the Messiah, which we see laid out in Luke, Matthew with the birth of Christ. We see that Satan counterfeited that way back in ancient Babylon with this Mystery Babylon religious system that was based upon the dying and resurrected sun god king married to the virgin queen of heaven, earth mother goddess, who gives birth to the virgin-born sun god princeling, who is the son of the sun god king, who dies and comes back to life. And in Freemasonry, what do you have? Oh, you've got the widow's son, Hiram Abiff, and then you've got the widow's son. Who's this widow's son that everybody in Freemasonry talks about? So if involved in the Masonic group and you're going through the rituals, you're going to see that you've got to give homage to the widow's son, you know, and poor widow. They're like, the widow's son? I don't get it. Widow's son, think about it. The widow is none other than Semiramis. And the son of the widow is Tammuz, who is really a foreshadow of
Antichrist.
the Antichrist. So in Freemasonry, when they talk about giving homage and dedication and reverence to the widow's son, they're really talking about the Antichrist. But you would never draw that conclusion if you're in Freemasons. You're like, oh, the widow's son, yeah, it's a story of Hiram Bliss and mother, and then she died, and she was left, without a son, and da-da-da-da. And it's so sad, what that's really talking about is the archetypal story of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. And Nimrod being killed by Shem, a righteous man, because of his abominations and pedophilia and necrophilia and human child sacrifice. Eventually, we have the mythos promoted by Semiramis that he came back to life in the form of his son. And so that Babylonian mystery religion system goes all the way through to the modern day. Ancient Druidism, witchcraft, Wicca, Eastern mysticism, apostate Christianity, Freemasonry, all of that laid together in a modern day iteration, which we see John writing about in Revelation 17. So Mystery of Babylon, again, it's a city, but it's also a religious belief system that the Antichrist has to use to consolidate his rule over the whole world. So now, let's take a look at, we've got Rod here, Chuck Missler, friend of Rod's, a nice guy. He takes Revelation 17:10, and he says, again, Revelation 17:10 is short, so let's get eager, whoever gets there first. Rod, you get there first, you can read it in your verse.
There are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time.
Okay, Chuck Missler says that those 5 fallen kings, 5 are fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. Chuck Missler makes a pretty persuasive argument that the 5 fallen kings are the Egyptian empire. He's saying the kings is synonymous with a kingdom, not necessarily an individual. He's saying it's a reigning nation state, as opposed to, what Adrian Rogers, which we'll look at next, says. So these are all great Bible prophecy guys, and they have disagreements on the interpretation of this one verse in Revelation 7. This is a very difficult chapter to teach. That's why it's been going for 2 weeks, because there's a lot of stuff in here where a lot of great guys have written books about, and I'm sitting there reading this stuff like, man, these guys don't agree amongst themselves. But they've got the general right understanding that this is a dispensational thing that talks about kings that are coming in the future, not preterism, where the Caesars ruled, once upon a time in America. But Chuck Missler says that the 5 fallen kings who fell before John wrote the book of Revelation was the Egyptian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, Babylonian Empire of Nebuchadnezzar, or Neo-Babylon, the Persian Empire, the Grecian Empire. And then when he gets to verse 6, he says, one is, what is he talking about? The Roman Empire. Because, and I think this makes a lot of sense, because the one who is the Roman Empire, because at the time John is writing Revelation in 96 AD, he's under the arrest and control and custody of the original Roman Empire, Rome 1, which we have right here. Of these 7 kings, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome 1, Rome 2. John is under the control or authority of Rome 1 when he's writing the book of Revelation. So as he's seeing this, he's saying, okay, there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece. One is Rome 1, and the other has not yet come. And Chuck Missler says that's Rome 2, or the revived Roman Empire, which is from the area from which the one world ruler comes, which is the Antichrist, which will be consistent with Daniel 9, when he says, the people of the prince that shall come and destroy the temple. prince of the people that shall come, the people that came and destroyed the temple were the Romans. So the prince that shall come, Daniel was referring to the Antichrist. People say, well, that means that the Antichrist comes from out of the Roman Empire, which he very well may do, even though there are verses that refer to the Antichrist as the Assyrian. But Rome was so expansive that it includes territory that also was part of the Assyrian Empire. So ethnically, the Antichrist could have some type of Assyrian sort of roots or heritage, but he could also be part of the governmental authority of the ancient Roman Empire, which was so broad and expansive. So, okay, that's Rod's friend's Chuck. You remember any of Chuck's teachings where he kind of gave you any insight?
I was always confused in this part. That's why
This is the most
Yeah,
confusing
Awesome.
chapter in the Bible. I said before you came here,
I
I
heard
said,
so many different versions. I'm like, wow.
trust me, the 2 weeks I've spent trying to prepare to teach this thing, I woke at 4 o'clock tonight. I woke at 4 o'clock this morning. Like, yeah, I got a murder case, and I got to get this stuff. And from 4 to pretty much like 8 or 9, I'm sitting there just comparing the notes and comments. And I'm like, holy moly. I mean, I said, when I get to heaven, I'm going to pull the Holy Spirit aside and say, what were you thinking of when you wrote verse 11 of Revelation 17, which says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth in the Revelation. What on earth does that mean? How would you expect anyone to even understand that? So, I think the point is he wants us to study it, and as we study it, he gives us insight. So, even studying, even though I can't say with absolute certainty whether Chuck is right and Adrian Rogers is wrong, or Dave Hunt is right about the woman riding the beast in the city of Rome, or is Mark Hitchcock right that it's really the rebuilt city of Babylon in Iraq, or is it what Chuck says, and the position I take is that it's both. I'm having both, have my cake and eat it too. But now let's take the final view that we're going to look at tonight of Revelation 17:10 as to regards these 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. Adrian Rogers says that the 5 that are fallen were the kings of Rome, the Caesars, who had already fallen as of 96 AD. And he limits it not to the great rulers of the great world empires, which is what Chuck Missler interprets it to be, and what Mark Hitchcock interprets it to be. But he looks at it as, since this is dealing with the Roman Empire, he's talking about, in Revelation 17:10, only the Roman Empire. So Adrian Rogers says that the 5 kings are as follows. King Augustus, or the Caesar, Augustus Caesar, Claudius Caesar, Caligula, the sexual perverted Caesar, Tiberius, who burned Christians and did all kinds of crazy, horrific stuff. And then the 5th being Nero, who had fallen. And then he says that the 6th of these 7 kings is none other than Domitian, who was Caesar at the time that John was in captivity on the island of Patmos in 96 AD. So when he says, okay, there are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, Adrian Rogers says that's Augustus, Caesar, Claudius, Caligula, Tiberius, and Nero. And then as of 96 AD, 1 is, that's Domitian, Caesar at the time, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short space. Everybody agrees that 7th guy is the Antichrist. There's a lot of disagreement as to who the first 5 are and who the one that is. But everybody agrees that this last guy is the Antichrist. Of the 8 kings, because it's so confusing. 7, Revelation 17:9 and Revelation 17:11 talks about 8 kings. But then Revelation 17:10 talks about 7 kings. And so, boy, it gets you going back and forth, man, and it gets you thinking. But let's, Steve, read verse 11 for us again.
And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7th, and goeth into perdition.
What in the world is that, man? But here, I think Hitchcock and Wahlberg have a pretty good analysis there. You know, so give me that again, Steve.
And the beast that was, and is not, even he is of the eighth, and is of the seventh, and goeth into perdition.
Okay, so you say he's of the eighth. No, but it should say he is the eighth, doesn't it?
Even he
He
is the eighth.
the
Okay. He is the eighth and is of the seven.
Is of the
Meaning
seventh.
he's related to the seven, but he's not one of the seven.
He's a separate one. He's
He
the
kind of
eighth.
comes from out of there. He's
Exactly.
inspired by those guys. So the eighth final one world government ruler is the Antichrist, who is of the seven,
Okay.
specifically the seventh, which is the revived Roman Empire, which was consisted of 10 world governors, 3 of whom rebelled against this guy trying to take over the world and were put down and subdued. And we know that that occurs because Daniel chapter 7 verse 23 tells us so. And whoever can read that, just hit that real quick. Look, Daniel chapter 7 verses 23, 4, and 5, and then we'll get to your question, Phil. Daniel chapter 7 verses 23 through 25 kind of gives us...
Thus, he said,
Hold on a second, Bill.
Oh.
It kind of gives us the interpretation or the explanation for why you have in one point 10 kings, but then we're talking about 7 kings, and it's like, wait a minute, there's a typo there. Is it 10 kings or is it 7 kings? So, give me, Dan, go ahead and read, Dan.
Oh, I thought he had it.
You can go ahead and read your version.
Oh, I didn't look at it.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horse out of the kingdoms are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them. And it shall be diverse from the first, and it shall subdue 3 kings.
There you have it. The 3 kings are subdued. So you add 10, you got 3 subdued, and what version do you have there, Rob? You got an NIV?
NIV.
Read that, just let me hear what it is.
7.
23, 4, and 5.
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given unto his hands, or into his hand,
For how long?
for a time and times and a half time.
How long is that?
3 years and a half.
years,
Okay.
14 months.
So that's where I get my interpretation that Antichrist is going to take the first half of the tribulation period, consolidating his power, negotiating with the 10 regional kings that we already see those regions in place in the IMF, in the World Bank. It's very easy. You know, you already have the world divided into 10 geographical regions, which are geopolitical regions. And for economic purposes, they're already divided out, and each, have their own governor. Is going to be, okay, Governor Jones, you're in charge of North American Union. What's going on there? Well, we're trying to get the currency done. The President of the United States is in negotiation. So it'll be very easy to have 10 guys named, and they probably already have 10 regional governors. Whether they would be the guys that will be in place when the Antichrist is finally revealed remains to be seen. But the point is, Antichrist is going to use that first half of the 70th week of Daniel, which is, what we see on the big board here. We got the first half of the 70th week. Antichrist is now using that to consolidate and negotiate with the 10 regional governors, or what, John calls 10 kings, because they have rulership or authority or power. He's using that time to negotiate with them and to ingratiate himself. And at the same time, on comes on the scene this false prophet, this religious leader who may be the final pope of the Roman Catholic Church, based in Vatican City in Rome, which would give you the Dave Hunt, A Woman Rides the Beast, being the seven-hilled city of Rome, because the woman riding the beast is decked out in scarlet and in purple. And she's drunk with the blood of the saints, and she's decked out with gold and silver. And she's riding the beast, not fighting the beast. And so it's just almost too coincidental to say that this woman is drunk with the blood of the saints and has committed fornication with the kings of the earth. So Dave Hunt makes a point. He says, when was Babylon ever in any kind of fornicative relationship with other nations of the earth? When Babylon was running the show, Babylon was the center of the earth. Babylon was running the whole world. Didn't have to, consolidate or commit iniquity with other kings to ask for power and favor, but the Roman Catholic Church had to do that. When the Roman Empire gave way to the Catholic Church, for a while the Catholic Church had a great deal of power and military heft. But then as they began to lose some of the military heft, they had to negotiate and do things with Rome, with England or Spain or France to maintain their control there. And that's what the Concordat with Adolf Hitler was all about during World War II. Like, hey, when you establish your Third Reich, we won't say anything about that Holocaust thing as long as you make us the official state church of the Nazi Empire. And that was the secret Concordat between Adolf Hitler and the Pope. That's why the Catholic Church said nothing about the Holocaust. And you got documents in the basement of the Vatican right now that prove it. And so, there you have it. So Dave makes a persuasive argument that the woman riding that beast is none other than the Roman Catholic Church. But again, as I said in my little summary, it's more than just that. It's more than just the Catholic Church. It's also this mystery Babylon system, this religious, false, pseudo God worship system existed before the Catholic Church even existed. It existed back in ancient Babylon of Nimrod. It existed in the Garden of Eden with Satan and Eve, when that first awful offer, get a cultic knowledge, rebel against God, and you become gods. Does that sound like something you'd be interested in? Yes, I'm yet. Well, here's a condition. You gotta get your husband to sign up too. And that's your job, because we don't have a relationship with him. And so Eve got Adam to sign up for occultism, and she got to become a goddess. And there you go. And that's how the whole ball of wax started. And then we have that same thing being played out again and again and again, all the way through the Babylonian Empire of Nimrod. And so when we get to the point where Zechariah has that vision that we're going to talk about in a little bit, we see that, wow, man, feminism and ancient Babylonian paganism are tied hand in hand. What we see going on in the media, whether it be Hillary Clinton running for president, or whether we see Ronda Rousey, World WWF boxing, is like you would think Muhammad Ali came out of retirement and is fighting, Joe Frazier for the fourth time. I'm like, who is this Ronda Rousey chick, and why do I care? Why is this being published like the greatest thing that ever happened in boxing? Because she's a girl, right? And then she got the crap beat out of her, from what I hear. She wasn't the greatest boxer of all time, because she lost to somebody nobody ever even heard of. Yeah, so it's because the media is pubbing or promoting an agenda, propaganda. And there's a book written under that title where it's like, Control the Minds of the People Through the Use of Propaganda. Who wrote that book? Bonus points to whoever can figure that out.
Oh, I know that. I've seen this. Lippmann. Walter Lippmann?
Nope, it wasn't him.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it was a very famous book on how to control minds through the use of propaganda. But that's what, man, it's out there. It's in that, any conspiracy genre type. It's funny, I was watching, what was it, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's like this TV show based on the Avengers. But the last episode, it was taken like directly out of the book of Revelation, the book of Daniel, about, they found these ancient writings and drawings that tie to the opening of a portal. This is a sigil that, the ancient societies, they used to do blood sacrifices to invoke the power of devils that lived in the air so that they could open the portal
Bernays.
to
Sorry.
Bernays. Yeah, that's right. William Bernays. But he said, you know, in the show they were talking about, you know, they would do these ancient blood sacrifices, and that's where we get the myths of devils and demons, you know, because of blood. And of course, they, you know, they show the symbol, and eventually you turn the symbol upside down. What was it? It's none other than a Baphomet head, of course. And I was like, man, are they being that blatant? They're just putting basically the Book of Daniel and Book of Revelation in comic book form and putting it on television, because they are preparing us. It's called the externalization of the hierarchy by putting it right in our face, so that as we see it happening, we're just passive, like, man, I saw this on TV.
Yes.
Man, it's coming, so ain't no sense in me fighting against it. Because I saw this episode of The Avengers. I know how it ends, man. The guy with the horns wins. So why put up a struggle?
That's a big deal, yeah.
So what I'm saying is, man, we are living in a time where we are seeing scary, crazy things. So okay, so we got the different views of Mystery Babylon. We've got 4 primary views. The Dave Hunt view that Mystery Babylon in Revelation 17 is the city of Rome, which is the seat of the Roman Catholic Church. The one Catholic means what, Rob? Universal.
You said one cat.
Catholic means what?
One cat.
No, I didn't say one Catholic. I said Catholic means what? Catholic means universal in your Latin. So whenever you're saying the Roman Catholic Church, you're saying the one world church of Rome. And that's what Revelation is saying Antichrist uses to obtain world leadership. Is a one world church based at the city on 7 hills, with a woman dressed in scarlet and purple with gold on. Dave Hunt says, God, you're talking about the Catholic Church. It's saying, you know, in their title of their name, they're saying they're the one world global church. And then they use other titles for the Virgin Mary. What do the Roman Catholics refer to the Virgin Mary as?
Queen of Heaven. What they
Queen
call
of
it.
Heaven. Where in the Bible is the Queen of Heaven referenced? Not in the Gospels. Not in the Nativity story about little baby Jesus being born of the Queen of Heaven. No, it's talking about Jeremiah condemning Israel for baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven. And who is this Queen of Heaven? We know because he says that the priests and the people that came to the temple, they were also, in addition to baking cakes for the Queen of Heaven, they were also participating in the other part of the ceremony, which was to participate in the ceremony of
Easter, Ishtar?
Weeping for Tammuz.
war.
Tammuz.
Who's Tammuz?
Samuel,
The Prince Son.
The son of who?
The Sun God.
Semiramis.
No, the son of
Semiramis.
the son of the literal Queen of Babylon, the wife of Nimrod. Semiramis named her kid Tammuz. They were worshiping Tammuz in the Old Testament in the temple of God. And when the angel showed, was Jeremiah, I think it was, says, you think that homosexual scene you just saw that? I'll show you something even worse than this. Come here. Let me take you to the temple. And he said, look at those men. And they're worshiping with their faces towards the east and their backs towards the Holy of Holies. Like, how could you be worshiping the God of Israel with your back to him? You walk in the courtroom, you don't turn your back to the judge. It's considered disrespectful. They were facing the east because the sun
Sunrise.
rose. They were worshiping the dying and resurrected sun god king, who was resurrected in the form of his virgin-born son, Tammuz, which is where we get the sign of the cross from. And ancient Israel was participating in baking cakes to the Queen of Heaven, Semiramis, and worshiping her sun god resurrected son, Tammuz, who was really her dead, killed husband, Nimrod, who had died and resurrected again in the form of the holy divine child, Tammuz. All of that is in the Bible. That is the Mystery Babylon system that is laid out in the Old Testament. So again, 4 views. Dave Hunt says One, Mystery Babylon is Rome. Two, you've got Joe Chambers and Mark Hitchcock says Babylon is the rebuilt city of Babylon in Iraq. And then the third view is that New York City is sort of metaphorically the Babylon of the Book of Revelation. And then the fourth version or view is that Mystery Babylon equals or is the rebuilt city in Iraq and the Roman false church system that's headquartered in Rome but spreads over the whole world. And that's the view I take, Chuck Missler takes, and it incorporates Dave Hunt's view, which I think is unassailable, Joe Chambers and Mark Hitchcock's view that the rebuilt city of Iraq is also the physical city. And the reason why I think that's important is a verse in Zechariah that we're going to look at in a second. But a little note that I made to myself that Dave Hunt says Rome, Chambers says it's rebuilt Babylon, Missler says it's both, and I like that view because I remember he invited Dave Hunt to his Koinonia house, and they did a double teaching. And so Chuck Missler taught on his view on the Roman Catholic Church, and Dave Hunt gave his Woman Rides the Beast lecture. It was pretty interesting. And so, Ingrid, while I have you, why don't you read for us Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 4, since we just had verse 11. So,
Chapter
13, 1 through 4.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast ride up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him power, and his seat, and great authority. And when I saw one of his heads, as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who's able to make war with him?
There you go. That's the verse that I was making reference to earlier about Antichrist being assassinated, the beast that was, is not, goeth into perdition, and when he comes back, he's the man, right? The guy who was, and then was not, and he was alive, then he was dead, and ascendeth out of the bottomless pit. That's the verse from Revelation 13 referring to the Antichrist that I think confirms conclusively that the Antichrist is assassinated during about the midway point of the tribulation period. When he comes back from the dead, Satan is allowed to resurrect him, and now he's considered a real God-man. He's really the God. He's proven that he's everything Nimrod was and more. And some people think he'll even be a former world emperor, ruler, come back from the dead. Maybe he's Nimrod resurrected. I've always believed that the Antichrist was never, just an evil man, but he was a hybrid. He was a Nephilim. He had the genetics of the fallen angels. That's why he was a seed of the serpent, which is what Genesis chapter 3 said would be the final iteration of the Antichrist. He would be the seed or biological offspring of the serpent, Satan himself. Now here, while I have you, we were talking about Joe Chambers' view and Mark Hitchcock's view that it's the rebuilt city of Babylon in Iraq. And Dave Hunt's already made unassailable arguments, I think, proving that the religious form of the Mystery Babylon system is the Roman Catholic Church at the Vatican in Rome. But this verse that Ingrid's going to read for us is the verse that I use to support the Chambers-Hitchcock view that it is the city of Babylon in Iraq as well, which is why I think Chuck Missler is correct, that both sides are correct. So, Ingrid, if you would, give us Zechariah 5, verses 5 through 11.
Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what is that goeth forth. And I said, What is that? And he said, This is an ephah. Ephah?
It's like a wicker basket.
Okay, this is an
Ephah.
ephah that goeth forth. He said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And he said, This is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. Then lifted I up mine eyes, and looked, and behold, there came out 2 women, and the wind was in their wings.
They had wings, so these were like female angels. The only time you'll see an angelic being described as being a female, they're wicked and evil.
For they had wings like the wings of a stork,
Which is an unclean animal in the law of Moses.
and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, To build in a house in the land of Shinar, and it be established and set there upon her own base.
So there you have it. So an ephod is a wicker basket. So
Mhm.
in the New
Yeah.
King James says, Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were 2 women coming with the wind in their wings, and they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between the earth and the heaven. So I said to the angel that talked with me, Where are they carrying the basket?
Mm.
And he said to me, To build a house for it in the land of Shinar. And when we talked earlier, and we agreed that the land of Shinar is what?
Is New York.
No.
Babylon, the old
Yes. Yes. Remember, we said whenever we hear about Shinar in the Bible, it's the plain upon which the city of Babylon was built. It was sort of the province that Babylonia, Erech, Akkad, all of the great Sumerian cities were built in this neighborhood called Shinar. So think of it as it's sort of like being in the design district or something like that. And Shinar and Babylon, the literal Babylon, in Iraq, are one and the same, synonymous. So this 500 years before Jesus, Zechariah writes that he sees this woman. I think it's the same woman that John is seen riding on a beast in Revelation 17. She's in a wicker basket being flown by 2 unclean birds who are women. Fallen angelic hybrid beings, women with stork wings. Not a good combination. And it says, this is wickedness. What are they doing? They're flying her to Babylon in Iraq to build her a house. So I think that supports the argument that the religious headquarters or center of worship of Mystery Babylon will be transferred from the Roman Vatican to the city of Iraq. And maybe that's towards the end of the first half of the tribulation period. Because we know at the midpoint, Antichrist is assassinated by one of those 3 rebellious kings. And then when he goes into the bottomless pit, he's indwelt by Satan, comes out of the pit, and puts down those 3 kings. And now he doesn't need Mystery Babylon, the religious system, to unite the world behind him, because all the world now is in awe and fear of him. Oh my gosh, he came back from the dead. He cannot be opposed. Satan is now working directly through him. So it's at this point, at the halfway point of the tribulation, I believe, that's when Antichrist decides to get rid of Mystery Babylon, or Babylon the Great, the whorish religious system that has been drunk with the martyrs, and so drunk with the martyrs of Jesus. And another point is made by Dave Hunt. He says, when did Nebuchadnezzar or Nimrod put to death Christians? The answer is he never did, right? Why didn't he?
There were no Christians there.
There were no Christians. When Nimrod, walked the earth, and when Nebuchadnezzar walked the earth, there were no Christians, and there wouldn't be any for like centuries, millennia. So it can't be ancient Babylon that's drunk with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, but the Roman Catholic Church came along after Jesus. And as Steve said, plenty of Christians, more than the Jews and Muslims combined, were put to the sword, burned at the stake, tortured to death by the Roman Catholic Church because they refused to accept the Pope as the replacement of Jesus Christ on the earth. That's why we have the Huguenots, the Waldenses, Hussites, Albigenses. All of them had to go flee into the Swiss Alps because the Roman Catholic Church controlled the cities of France and throughout most of Europe. And so they fled to the mountains to live up in the snow-capped peaks to avoid the inquisitors and the executioners of the Catholic Church would put them to death on sight unless they wanted to torture them and have fun with them first. So that has to be the Roman Catholic Church system. There's no other system that has been in bed with political leaders and rulers and is charged of, ordaining, kings. The Catholic Church was like, we refuse to baptize him and ordain him into the Catholic Church. Okay, then you can't be king of England. Oh, please, Pope, give me another chance. I'll give you gold. I'll give you whatever. And at the same time, was able to put to death millions of Christians over the years. Only the Catholic Church did that. You can't say Islam did that. You can't say Hinduism did that. You can't say Nimrod. You can't say Nebuchadnezzar did that. So Dave Hunt makes a good point. That has got to be the Roman Catholic Church system, which is no longer needed when Antichrist comes back from the dead, and then he begins to phase out. And we see that judgment taking place next chapter, which we're going to get to. But before we do that, let's see. Okay, we've got 13:4. 12, 13, and 14, Phil?
From
I'm sorry, Revelation 17.
17, 12, 14.
13 and 14, yep.
And the 10 oaths which thou sawest are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as king 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give the power and strength unto the beast. They shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. 14.
Okay, and now in your sort of New Age translation, Rod, read the same.
Okay. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful.
Okay, so that's where I get my interpretation that these 10 regional governors of the one world system, they now, you know what? This guy is a great leader, man. This guy can bring us peace. He's like Kennedy and, all the other great leaders all rolled in one. You know what? Let's cede our authority to him and let him make the decision about economic policy. And this religious thing that's going on, all the people are uniting together. He gives great sermons, man. He's on, and the Pope backs him. And the Pope controls like 99% of the world is Roman Catholic at this point, because you can be a Zoroastrian or Wiccan or Satanist and still be in the Catholic Church. So they control the whole world, and the Pope's behind them. So these regional governors now cede their power to the Antichrist, and now he becomes a real world ruler. And I think that relates back to what Daniel was talking about in Daniel chapter 7. I'll just read Daniel chapter 7, verse 8 again. And it says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn and little one coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots, and there in this horn were the eyes of the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking pompous words. So, verse 7 of Daniel chapter 7 says this, and after I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, and it had huge iron teeth, and it was devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that came before it, and it had 10 horns. So there's a beast with 10 horns, and I think that's the same thing that we just had read in Revelation chapter 17 by Phil. Revelation 17 is saying the world is divided into 10 regions with 10 regional governors. Daniel, 2,500 years earlier, is seeing the same thing, and he's describing it as a fourth beast, dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong. And this fourth kingdom was different from all the beasts that was before it, and it had 10 horns. And then he says in verse 8, I was considering the horns, these 10 horns, or these 10 regional governors of the world at the time of the book of Revelation, divided into 10 regions, ruled over by 10 regional horns or governors. It says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, and a little one, coming up among them, before whom, not one, not two, but 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were the eyes of a man, were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth speaking pompous words. So, Antichrist knocks off or tears off or breaks off 3 of those 10 regional horns or regional governors to consolidate his rule over all 10 regions of the world. And I think that's what John is saying in different words, saying the same thing in Revelation 17, 12, 13, and 14. So now we'll finish up with Steve. Let's go ahead and get you with the old King James Version. Finishes out with verses 15 through 18.
And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, and nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate, and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
What city reigns over the kings of the earth? I don't think you would say Babylon, because there weren't really any kings of the earth competing with Babylon at the time. Yeah, I think you gotta. I think that great city that reigneth over the kings of the earth has got to be Rome, like Dave Hunt says. And I think eventually Babylon, Iraq will be rebuilt, and all of the religious authority will be governmental authority. So you'll have Rome being the religious center, and then you have Babylon being the governmental, economic center, and then eventually you won't need the religious center anymore, and it'll be destroyed. But I think that you have to say that woman who sits on many waters, meaning that the Roman Catholic influence has spread all around the world, just like water. I mean, it's not just in Rome. It's not like Catholic authority, ends at the end of Italy. As Italy goes into, Iberian Peninsula, then, it no longer has influence. No, the Roman Catholic Church has influence over the whole world. And it says the woman that thou sawest is that great city. So that's another argument, for, some people say, oh, well, United States of America is Babylon. Well, the United States of America isn't a city, so it wouldn't be that. But Rome is a city. And that city that reigneth over the kings of the earth, no city has had the influence over kings worldwide like Rome has. No other city. Not Paris, not Moscow, not New York City. Kings of the earth literally came to Rome to bow down.
Yeah.
Well, they do, but except there are no kings literally of the earth, but the political leaders. But back in the day, the actual kings actually came and bowed down and kissed the foot of the Pope. Michael Serraris, groveling in the snow. Please, old Pope, forgive my offense. And okay, now I'll let you be the king. over different countries. So I think that, yeah, God has put in the heart to fulfill his will and agree to give their kingdom unto the beast until these words be fulfilled. So these 10 horns, which thou sawest upon the beast, eventually they're going to hate the whore and make her naked and desolate. So I think Antichrist is going to use his control over the 10 nation governors, and he's going to use those individuals to turn against the woman and to destroy her, because he no longer has any use for her. And he's going to use those 10 regional governors to do that. So there'll be no need for a Roman Catholic Church anywhere in the world anymore, because the worship won't be the false pseudo-Christian religious system anymore. The Mystery Babylon system that began in the Garden of Eden and became awesome in the ancient city of Babylon, because the only source of worship at the latter half of the tribulation period will be
Worshiping the beast.
worshiping the beast, which is in and of itself worshiping the dragon, because it says, they gave worship and honor to the dragon and to the beast, who got his power from the dragon. So Satan will finally get the worship of the whole world that he always wanted, but it'll be in the person of the resurrected, dying, and resurrected Son God King, which will be his son, Antichrist, who in ancient times was referred to as Tammuz, or the Egyptians referred to as Horus. And it's amazing. We see this happening as laid out right in Scripture. We see all the mythos in ancient cultures and archaeology suggesting that very thing. When I first found out that the Bible made reference to a real Tammuz and the Queen of Heaven being worshipped in the temple, I was like, what? And then I asked myself, why would the Catholics name their goddess mother Virgin Mary the Queen of Heaven? Why would you adopt that title for your most revered and beloved figure in all of your religion? Why would you, like me, calling, my beloved the son of perdition? Like, well, in the Bible, son of perdition is the devil's son, and he's going to be destroyed. Why would you call the most beloved figure of Roman Catholicism the Queen of Heaven? Because the spirit behind the Queen of Heaven is none other than Satan dressed in drag, the ancient Babylonian mystery Babylon system that's hidden itself through the ages in many different forms and iterations. And we will see next week, when we get to Revelation 18, ultimately what judgment God brings on the mystery Babylon false whorish woman for all the things she's done to Christians throughout the years. Her judgment will be coming next week.
Week
So
after
we'll find
next.
that out. I'm sorry, the week after next. Next week, by the way, Thanksgiving, I forgot. So everybody next week, you can stay home and eat turkey and watch football, because we're not going to be on live unless you want to come and watch like a pre-recorded message on 24/7. So, okay, so 2 weeks from now, the judgment of the mystery Babylon system. God's going to put it in the heart of the Antichrist to destroy this woman and actually punish. Vengeance is mine, I will take him back, says the Lord. So eventually, mystery Babylon, this harlot religious system, is going to get her comeuppance. In 2 weeks, we'll find out how that happens, and it is not a pretty sight. God is going to eventually do it to him. So, with that, Rod, want to close this out, man?
Lord God, Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to study your word in the privacy of a home that you call a church. Thank you for giving wisdom to her from the studies of men who have done deep in the studies, just to learn what the future holds that you have foretold in the Bible, for us to learn and to dissect and to just have belief upon you that your word is true. For we are here today to be witnesses as these things come to light that you wrote many, many, many years ago. We thank you for this opportunity to study together, to fellowship together, and we have many more days to learn. And you give us the wisdom and knowledge to love one another, to learn from one another, and to be witnesses to the rest of the world, so that they may know that you are the God, our Lord, our Savior, Jesus Christ.
All right. Great. So I don't know